Chosen for What, a podcast by the Foundation for Genocide Education. I'm Tommy Schnurmacher, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we're joined by Emma Berger, our youngest participant and our very first fourth-generation guest on the podcast. Emma is the great-granddaughter of Holocaust survivor Anne and the granddaughter of Heidi Berger, president of the Foundation for Genocide Education. Emma grew up in Memphis, and although she's part of a generation more removed from the events of the Holocaust, her identity has been deeply shaped by the legacy of her great-grandmother through a very personal connection. We'll get into that. Hi, Emma. Welcome. First of all, I want to tell you that about something a little bit about your great-grandmother. I was on a radio show interviewing people, and they said that I'd be interviewing a Holocaust survivor who'd written a book. And I said, okay. So I said, great. I was looking forward to it and had a certain kind of expectation of what to expect. In your grandmother, your great-grandmother came in, smashed those expectations to absolute smithereens. She knocked me over for a loop. She was phenomenal. First of all, she told a horrific story of what she had gone through. And then after that, instead of the sadness and the depression and the low and the negative, it burst into positivity. Then I found out how she raised her children by getting them to be as strong and as brave as possible and not being overprotective. I found her like a phenomenal delight. So I am absolutely thrilled to meet you, and Emma. And I want to start with your family connection. Your grandmother, Heidi, is the president of the Foundation for Genocide Education. Her mother, your great-grandmother, Anne, who we're just talking about, was a Holocaust survivor. That's a powerful lineage. Tell me about your relationship to this legacy as you were growing up.
So, as you know, in Judaism, especially Ashkenazi tradition, you carry on legacy through name. And so I have, and I call her Gami. I have the same Hebrew name, Chana. And so that has really just at first, that's really shaped who I am. And having the same name as someone who has been through so much and took the challenges that she was presented and turned it into something amazing. And then my grandmother, who followed in her mother's footsteps and is now the president of the Foundation for Genocide Education and has done so much and has worked so hard to um, teach others about the events of different genocides. And having that ahead of me has really just allowed me to want to work the hardest that I can at becoming something of the same, like, big name, of having enough responsibility to follow in their footsteps.
Now, as you're all of 17 years old, you're our first fourth
16.
generation guest, and take me back. I mean, there's not a lot to take back since you're 17, but when did you first get an inkling of what had happened to your great grandmother? When did you first know anything about it?
So I was, as you previously mentioned, she had written a book. Um, and so it became a thing in my family. I got to read it when I was of bat mitzvah age. And so that is the first time that I really, obviously, I'd known from a young age that there was something called the Holocaust and a horrific thing happened, and that both my great grandparents, Henry as well, had been a part of it. But that's kind of all I knew until I was able to read her book. And so I read her book. And it really just, it opened my eyes up to what she had been through and the different challenges. So I read her book, was the first real story I had heard of what truly happened to her from her perspective.
What was your reaction as you were going through the book, as you were finding out page after page the horror she had gone through?
Honestly, and it hadn't been my first book that I've read talking about the Holocaust, but it was almost, you had to remind yourself, or I had to remind myself, that this is my family. These,
Right.
the names that are popping up, these are these are people from the generations before me, that it's not just like, it's not another person's story. This is my family's legacy. This is my family's story.
Yeah, there's a connection. Now, how do you feel your great grandmother Anne affected your grandmother Heidi, who's
My, I call her Mama Heidi.
Mama
Um,
Heidi? Okay,
but my Mama Heidi really took, all the resilience that Gammy had shown,
yeah,
um, that Anne had shown, and she turned it into something. I mean, Anne was an incredible person. I unfortunately never got to meet her, but my Mama Heidi took, um, Anne's resilience that she had taught her and turned it into something that could be taught for generations. She really works to continue the legacy that Anne had made for herself.
it's sad you never got to meet her. When I did meet her, that what stood out most about her, she was so cheerful and exuberant, which was not what you would expect given her staggering life experience, what she had gone through. Um, as as you were thinking about these things, what about your classmates, your friends, your associates who were the same age as you were at the time? Did you discuss it with them? What was their reaction?
It's unfortunately, it's not really talked about. I don't know if you had heard, I had given a speech at one of my grandmother's events, and I talked in that speech about how education in both the United States and Canada are really, it's lacking and there needs to be a change in it. And I gave a speech about it. And but that's another thing. Like my friends, it's not something you discuss. It's not, oh, let's sit down and talk about this. It's let's we watch movies as our education. It's not enough. So my friends, honestly, like they wouldn't have known enough
Right.
about it where I could have a structured conversation, and not because they're not interested in learning, but because there aren't resources being given to students to be able to learn.
I want to get back to that family connection. My father, Rabbi Miklos Schnurmacher, was a Holocaust survivor, and every year he had an event, Holocaust memorial event. The whole synagogue was devoted to that. And they would ask for guest speakers. And once they asked me to be a guest speaker, I'd done that many times before. It was no big deal. I had my mother help me because I had to do it in half Hungarian and half in English, and my Hungarian was a little rusty. So um, I thought, no problem. I prepared it and was ready to present it. When I started presenting it, and I was presenting it to an audience at the time, of other Holocaust survivors, and when I started talking about what they had lost to an audience that had gone through those similar losses, it was unbelievable. And I think it connects to what you said when you find out that it's not just history that happened to a number of people. It happened to you, to your family, to your extended family, and that's a profound impact. Do you feel that this weight of memory of the Holocaust shaped how you were raised, even generations after?
I think 100%. I think, especially with how Anne raised Heidi and how Heidi raised my father, um, really impacted how my father and my mother raised me. And having that background of strong, independent Jewish women, and the mindset of when things get difficult, you don't let it consume you. You persevere, you push past it. And it really did, like, they used those mentalities to shape me who I am today.
Now, you're as I mentioned, you're the only fourth generation guest we've had on the show. What does it feel like to be part of a generation that is further removed from the Holocaust but deeply impacted it? Obviously, you know about the Holocaust survivors, second gen. We have all kinds of groups, and then third gen, and it's following. But you're it. You're the fourth gen. How does it feel to be part of this generation that is further removed from the Holocaust, but at the same time still deeply impacted by it?
I think it just highlights how much you have to almost work towards being active in a Jewish community and making sure that um your Jewish identity is almost like solidified, because we are not the daughters and sons of Holocaust survivors. We're the great grandchildren. And so being the great grandchildren and being removed, as you had said, you almost have to put effort in.
What about the surge, the tsunami of anti-Semitism all over the world? What's your reaction to it? Have you encountered any of it where you are in Tennessee, for example?
So fortunately, it is not as bad here in Memphis as it is in Montreal. It is not as, I want to say, in your face, I feel is a good term. It is not, there's no signs on every corner saying different things, but there is more silent things. It's not talked about as
Mhm.
much. Even if it's talked about in a negative light, there is no communication about it whatsoever. It's a taboo subject that is not discussed really. And I go to a small private school here, but I do have a lot of friends that go to the bigger public schools, and they have very different stories. I've heard from some of my friends there are kids there who will put um the Palestinian flag on their backpack so it waves when they walk and stuff like that. At my school, it's a bit more it's not really discussed. There's no open anti-Semitism, but there is at the other schools. And so from my experience, I have not experienced in Memphis um any overt anti-Semitism. No one has come up in my face and said something, but that's not the experience for a lot of other teenagers here in Memphis.
Chosen for What is brought to you by the Foundation for Genocide Education. To learn more or to make a donation, head to gened.org. You'll find the link in the show notes. And now, back to the podcast.
Now, are there moments or stories that stand out to you, things that were passed down through your family that helped you understand what your great grandmother went through?
Obviously her book was a big part of understanding who she was and what she went through, but just everyone, whenever you hear the name Ann Kazimierski in my family, it's like a light. She is a um an amazing person with an amazing personality, and anytime she is brought up, it always has a positive aspect tied to it.
Right. Now, I want to go back because I think it's important to highlight, as I don't think we have so far in this discussion, but what actually happened to her. Like she saw her, I believe she saw her mother shot or father shot. Is that correct?
I believe it was her brother and father were taken away, and then I believe, yeah, she did see her mother killed.
Right. So, somebody who's gone through that, not only losing a mother is unbelievable loss, having her murdered is horrendous, have witnessing the killing of her mother. And then from that, one would think, well, this is going to be a sad, depressive person who completely enclosed within. No, no, not your great grandmother. She just decided to live life to the absolute fullest and spread this message of positivity despite her horrific experiences. This message of positivity wherever she went, whoever she spoke to, obviously to her children, to her grandchildren, and as we can see, to her great grandchildren.
Having learned Gammy's story, I became interested. I wanted to know more stories. And and so I did. I learned more, and I asked my grandmother um to help me learn more. And as said earlier, I spoke at the event on the lack of Holocaust education. And so I want to know more, but I only know more because I was interested in getting to a place where I could know more. It wasn't ever forced upon me to to want to seek more of an education on the matter.
What do you think is the importance of teaching the Holocaust? Why is it important from your point of view?
I think it's the basic thing that if you don't learn history, it can repeat itself. If you don't teach history, it can repeat itself. And also just being able to understand and see the like how the millions of lives were lost and what why it was wrong and how not to let it happen again, but under being allowing students to understand that it's it really can shape how you see. If you just hear World War II and that there was people fighting, then you don't understand the tragedy of it, and you don't understand the resilience after. It's like looking at Anne. To understand the woman she became, you have to look at everything she had to go through, and you can't begin to look until you are open to learning and are able to learn about the Holocaust.
When you speak about it, what are some of the questions that people ask you?
People honestly are just uh, amazed that someone who is so far removed from like through
They're
generations.
amazed that you're still interested and passionate
Yeah.
about it. And does that surprise you?
Yes and no, because there's a lot with my generation that is um saying that we're not as interested in learning about our history, and there's not as much interest in advocating for the people who came before us, but it's you have to look at it. It's a lot also with social media. There's a lot that is put in your face, and there's a lot more behind it. And so if you're willing to look behind it, then there's a lot of people who are willing to learn and such.
Emma, what worries you, if you think about being 17 years old and you think about the future, what worries you about the future?
That people are not going to um want to make an effort in learning and being active in a Jewish community. There's places like New York City and Montreal where there's a lot of Jewish people everywhere, so you don't have to try as hard, quote unquote, to
To
be
be part
Jewish
of
because
community.
you turn to your neighbor and they're also Jewish. But in a place like Memphis, there's 10,000 Jews, um, and there is quite a big population in Memphis. So 10,000 is not that big a number in comparison, and you have to make an effort. I'm part of different Jewish youth organizations because you have to try to be Jewish. You have to
You
make
have
an
to work at
effort
it.
for your Jewish identity, exactly. And so places like Memphis, there is a concern that if you don't teach the values of Judaism and show all the positives, as many negatives as all the positives of it, that people aren't going to be interested in continuing their Jewish identity. And what happens then? It's not, you have to continue to teach the stories, and you have to continue the traditions.
Now, I just asked you about, what worries you about the future, which is like sort of like a negative thing. And I'm thinking of Anna, your great grandmother right now. So of course I have to make it positive, and I want to know what you are optimistic about, because she was certainly a woman who went
Oh,
through horror and
yes.
was optimistic. I want to know what you, Emma, what are you optimistic about when you think about the future?
I think that if thousands of years of Jewish people can still thrive um, after everything that has happened, that a couple hundred more will be great for. If we can make it over what 5,000 years, I think we'll be good for the next couple hundred at least.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
we've got a good. I guess we've got a
got a
good
good thing going.
track record.
Yes.
Now, what do you want people to understand about your fourth generation perspective? What would you want to leave them with?
Um, that regardless of what we do or don't endure, that it's still important to teach the stories of those who came before us, but also write our own stories. It's important that we also share, even if we haven't been through hardship, but it's important to continue share our stories along with the people who came before us and traditions. And it's really important that to foster a good Jewish identity, that you are willing to both read the stories and make new ones.
Emma, an absolute delight talking to you. Thank you so much. Your story reminds us that history lives on, and it's not just in textbooks. It's in names, it's in values, it's in the stories we choose to carry forward. If you liked what you heard today, be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with family and friends. And if you'd like to support the work of the Foundation for Genocide Education, you can find a donation link in the show notes. Go to gened.org. I'm Tommy Schnurmacher. Until next time.